1,500 years. Ever since Jake had fallen into a hell dimension in his first life, he felt like he'd been constantly reacting to crazy new things. This one was a doozy, though. Only a moment ago, he had seen what looked like an enormous phoenix in the sky. His cultivation teacher from his first life had already disappeared. The crotchety old man had left him some contact information and more questions than answers. Now Jake was all by himself in another world. Unfortunately, sitting on the floor wasn't solving any of his problems. Nothing had changed from a few minutes ago, like finding out how he'd signed away 1,500 years of service to a dark goddess. He'd thought he'd been clever, limiting his deal to 3 years. It hadn't worked out that way. He was still a monster. Maybe being inhuman with strange natural abilities would help him survive his new job as the champion of a goddess. What looked like smoke rose off his body. One hand, his real one, went up to absently rub one of his horns. He'd been human before. That had been before he died, got sent back to the past, and turned into a monster by a vengeful evil god. Now he was a shadow ghoul, which he was rapidly beginning to understand was probably a lot more impressive back home than the world he was in now. This was the Murim world, where strength went beyond what Jake could imagine. At least his teacher had always said so. Jake wasn't sure how much time had actually passed since he'd been back in Macon, Georgia, on Earth, stopping an evil god from bringing vampire-flavored hell on Earth to the American South. Ultimately, it probably didn't matter since he was on contract with the goddess Morrigan now. Time moved more quickly in the Murim world compared to on Earth. Part of him wasn't surprised that his old master had vanished after a very brief, very annoying chat. Jake was all alone in a nearly empty log cabin. He slowly pushed himself up from the floor. The artificial hand he'd gotten through his deal with the Morrigan flexed when he willed it to. It felt like a part of him, even though it obviously wasn't. Everything that had happened over the last couple of weeks was overwhelming. But Jake was becoming practiced with overwhelming situations. His experiences had become a grueling sort of training in mental toughness. So when a screen popped up in front of him in midair, he barely blinked. What was one more weird thing when he'd just seen a phoenix the size of an aircraft carrier flying around in the sky outside? The screen said, "Welcome to the Integrated Eternal Struggle Reward System for Heroes and Champions. Jacob Hessian Mazzariello, Champion of the Morrigan. Origin World Dimension Rank 2, Name, Earth.